we're back with another Rick and Morty episode review, and the last episode of Season 7, which, frankly speaking, has been absolute fire. Definitely one of the best. They have made a number of bold choices to kick off this post-Roiland era, but I'm a huge fan of the direction they decided to take, and certainly look forward to whatever they decide to bring next. I was hoping to keep this week short and sweet, but man, they gave us one of the best episodes of the season. I'm already seeing rankings popping up, and this one is in everyone's top 3, and for good reason. So I'm just going to go ahead and call out the things I noticed, the things I liked, and the things I really liked, and as always, we'll end with my overall thoughts and rating for this episode. But before we do that, go ahead and hit that like button and join me in the comment section with all your thoughts and theories, your concerns and praises. I want to hear them all, or read them all, so I hope to see you down there. But with that said, let's dive on in. Now, there is so much to unpack within this episode. I think this is one of the rare few that fans will be able to dissect and analyze for years to come. It's so deep thematically, so personal for our character's development, in particular Morty, and so rich with life lessons. These are the types of episodes that really make you stop and think and will constantly have you second-guessing the takeaways and possible inferences. So, needless to say, I am no expert on what this episode is trying to say, but I've got some ideas. For starters, this episode dives into the idea of fear. Fear. Now, the whole first starts out with the primal fear of pain.
Still will I stop you with maggots.
No one revels in pain, except maybe the Cenobite demons, and so the whole immediately starts off with that nifty tool, but as soon as you're able to cope and then conquer that fear, the whole needs to rely on deeper metaphysical ones. And so Morty is quickly plunged into a world where Rick is taken away from him by an alive Diane and forced to grapple with the idea that his deepest fear is losing Rick.
So what? He's scared of love?
Everyone's scared of love, dipshit. You learn that in your 20s. It takes a very rare, very powerful being to be terrified of happiness. The smarter you are, the more you know. Happiness is a trap. It can't last forever. The point is, happiness always ends.
Happiness always ends, and so does life, which is the second most primal fear of man's existence. But for Morty, that can happen at the drop of a hat. Death has no meaning to someone like Morty, who will always be bailed out by Rick, but what if Rick leaves? Who is Morty without his grandpa, and what is life without him and their shared adventures?
But if you go, you'll take him away. Don't worry. Rick will die before accepting happiness. After that, we'll chase you with some clowns or some dumb shit like that. But Grandpa, yummy, Grandpa's gonna die.
Rick is finding his groove back with these adventures after completing his life's purpose of avenging his wife and killing Rick Prime. But Morty's life is just beginning in a way, and he still has a purpose left to find, and most probably, one devoid of Rick.
I'm afraid you'd never say that in real life. I'm afraid that if I jumped into a hole, you wouldn't even bother jumping in after me. You didn't go in at all?
No, it's a one-person ride. You can't face two fears at the same time. If my fear was fire and yours was water...
I get it.
Put it this way, you're all basically NPCs. Only Morty and I are real, so your side quests don't matter.
Us viewers are constantly left wondering where can this show go, and what will we do when Rick and Morty inevitably comes to an end, despite Dan Harmon saying the show could go on for 100 years. Well, Morty is asking himself similar questions. He's afraid his life as he knows it will end as soon as Rick leaves him, either literally or figuratively, on accident or on purpose. Morty's life shouldn't end just because Rick dies, and yet Morty is forced to tackle with that fear in this episode, amongst many others.
How about this?
Morty, what are you doing?
Being scared!
And yet another angle that this episode plays with is that maybe Morty's biggest fear isn't something as simple as losing Rick.
I think I figured it out, Morty. Your greatest fear is me getting Diane back and being happy again.
What? Why?
Because then I won't need you.
What kind of backhanded-ass theory is that? My greatest fear is you hooking up.
You're right. We can't know for sure until I get more data.
Maybe it isn't that he's perfectly replaceable, just like Rick has been telling him this entire time.
If you can't follow them...
I can be replaced. Yeah, so you keep telling me.
Excuse me? Did you just try to call my bluff? Have you ever seen me bluff?
Fine. You know what? Replace me. Replace me, Rick. Just do it. Good luck finding someone that can be told 80,000 times how replaceable they are.
Maybe Morty isn't afraid of just being lonely. Maybe he's afraid that that fear itself is his biggest fear. I mean, he is his father's son after all.
Oh my god, I've turned into my dad!
He's afraid that he's so dependent on Rick, so useless, so meaningless, so irrelevant without him. This season, this show, has shown us plenty of who Rick is without Morty, but who is Morty without Rick? Well, he's still trying to figure that out himself, and maybe now, with this burden seemingly lifted off his shoulders, he has a real chance.
You're the only thing I can't replace.
Okay, Mr. Weepy. I'm not even real. Remember? Nothing's real. That's your jam, right?
Right. I'm supposed to go in there and be shocked that there's no hole or that there is a hole. What difference would it make?
Now, another big theme that this episode plays with is, you guessed it, what is real versus what is fake. Once again, this episode plays with this recycled theme, though I don't know if it's ever been as heavy-handed as it was here, and I don't know if it's been as full of conviction on an answer either. Because this episode most certainly states its claim that what does it matter? Life is what you make it, and fear will always announce itself as a hurdle to get in your way. You can use that as an excuse for your failure, or you can push through to succeed. This episode states that you simply shouldn't care. Life will move on with or without you, so why not go along for the ride?
Okay, we're clearly still in the
That's
hole.
exactly what I was thinking.
You never left the hole, and
Part of the hole is thinking you left the hole,
then it can really dig into you.
Because you can't really be scared of anything if you know you're still in the hole.
Now, I love this early twist that they're still in the hole. It's a great way of getting ahead of that theory that we were all thinking at that moment that Diane dropped in.
You're always expecting a twist. In a world where you're always on guard against that kind of stuff, what would happen to challenge you?
This was a great twist to the story and a perfectly sensible one to mix things up and elevate it all, even if it has been done before. The knowledge of the hole's existence while still inside it allows for tons of character growth for Morty. He basically lives through all his biggest fears, even living out half of his life at one point just to learn he fears becoming his father. It reminded me a lot of the game Roy, where he lived out a full life as a video game character only to come out and forcibly learn that lesson Rick so often recites: nothing matters. Heck, it even reminded me of Loki in Season 2. I won't spoil one of its bigger twists here, but if you know, you know. It makes me wonder, is Morty a master of his fear now? Will he be able to move on more detached from his dependency on Rick? Or are they still in the hole? Either way, I'm certainly excited to see where his character goes from here.
I swear to God, if we're still climbing out of this fucking hole 2 seasons from now.
And building off that, another incredible thing this episode does for the longevity of the show is provide a built-in, readily accessible retcon.
His name is Brett Kahn. He has the power to make things always have been other things.
The showrunners now have a perma-retcon at their disposal if they ever want to reset the story back to this point. Whether things get too messy or a certain season or two just goes really poorly with us fans, they have an out now, and it's not even a one-time use. And I mean, let's be real, they are for sure going to use it at some point in the near future, especially if they plan on going for 100 years.
It's just Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty and their adventures, Morty. Rick and Morty forever and forever, 100 years. Rick and Morty things.
Overall, Fear No Mort is one of the strongest episodes from Season 7. It goes back to that horror inspiration which earlier seasons were so familiar with, diving deep into the minds of our characters, exploring who they are, what they fear, and the relevancy of reality itself.
Dear God!
The visuals from this episode might be my favorite from the season, and while the humor was a little less frequent and pungent, it was a lot wittier than most of the gags within Season 7.
God damn it! Is this gonna be a whole thing?
No wordplay, Morty.
I doubt your grandpa has more fear than the average asshole in a Denny's.
Hey!
Sorry.
It's certainly a challenging episode as it forces our characters, most specifically Morty, to confront, cope with, and then conquer their deepest, darkest fears. And all the while playing with that oh-so-familiar theme of what is real.
Wait, are we sure this isn't like a double mislead?
A double mislead, like we went into a generic fear hole and then coincidentally came home to that?
But then, what is this?
Don't worry about it, it's not real.
This episode states that when you don't face your fears and conquer them, then they'll end up conquering you in the end. And once you realize that nothing truly matters, then there's nothing left to fear other than fear itself.
Fear.
Lastly, I was a big fan of all the Diane stuff we got here, even if it did end up being from Morty's perspective. I certainly hope for more one-off episodes like this in future seasons that give us more background and lore for our main duo, even if it is just bit by bit. But those are just my thoughts on the episode, and I would love to see yours down in the comments below. Where does this one stand amongst the rest of Season 7 for you? If you enjoyed the review, let me know by hitting that like button, and if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Season 7 thus far, you can check out my previous episode reviews using the links in the description below. I'll also be putting out my Season 7 episode ranking within the coming weeks here, as well as my updated season ranking, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss those. In the meantime, I have a bunch of previous Rick and Morty rankings which you can check out using the playlist in the outro, but as for now, that's it from me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you all next time.
Rick, am I irreplaceable?
I mean, define irreplaceable.
That's good. Good. I'm back.